Harrington, the Executive Director of Treatment Action Group, and I wanted to thank the other organizers and sponsors of this briefing about the importance of tuberculosis research and development in the lead up to the UN General Assembly special session on tuberculosis, which, as you all know, is the first ever session to be devoted to this leading killer of people around the world, including people living with HIV and the leading killing pathogen that's associated with antimicrobial resistance. I want to thank our other organizers and sponsors, the permanent missions of Brazil and India to the United Nations, Médecins Sans Frontières, the Stop TB Partnership, the Union, the United Nations Development Program, and the World Health Organization. And I'd like to welcome their director of their NTB program, Dr. Teresa Casaeva. Unfortunately, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, who is the Deputy Director General for Programs at the World Health Organization, was unable to attend in person, but she felt it was so important to let us know what the WHO vision is about the importance of TB research in the upcoming high-level meeting that she has graciously sent us a video message, which we're going to use to kick off this briefing. Thank you.
I'm Soumya Swaminathan. I'm Deputy Director General for Programs. And in my former life, I was a TB researcher and head of the Indian Council of Medical Research in India. I want to thank you all for participating in this quite historic civil society hearing on the first ever UN high-level meeting on TB that's coming up in September this year. We have an enormous opportunity now to mobilize the forces from around the world, whether it's governments, academics, researchers, civil society, and of course people who have been affected by TB, both infected and affected individuals in this fight against this disease, which has been with us for so long now that we don't even think about it as something new. So this is where there's the contrast between a disease like TB, which has affected and killed millions of people globally every year, ever since we have history, to diseases like HIV or even some of the emerging infections like Ebola or Nipah or MERS, where global attention to the disease and a focus on R&D has been able to produce vaccines and diagnostics and treatments at a speed which could not even be imagined. So this is where I think we need to come together and really rally around and ask all the stakeholders to pool their resources and develop the new tools that we need for TB. TB still kills 1.7 million people globally every year. It's a disease that can be diagnosed, it can be treated, it can be prevented, even though we still don't have a very good vaccine. And yet, we don't seem to be able to reduce the number of people either developing TB or dying from TB. And the advances that we made are slowing down and are certainly not fast enough for us to be able to reach the SDG goals or the NTB strategy goals that the world signed up to. There are a lot of encouraging signs, though. I think in the last year or so, we've seen sort of unprecedented political commitment towards TB, from starting with, of course, the UN General Assembly in December 2016 that actually initiated the process for this high-level meeting. We have the G20 meeting last year that talked about TB as being one of the big problems as far as antimicrobial resistance is concerned. We had the WHO ministerial meeting in Moscow that brought together ministers from over 100 countries to commit to TB. We had the BRICS health ministers meeting and agreeing on a joint strategy and as well as a BRICS R&D network. And then we had the NTB summit in New Delhi in March this year, where we had the Prime Minister of India making very, very strong commitments and urging others to do so as well. So we've got the political commitment, and hopefully we'll get more of that in September, and more heads of state will commit to really investing in making sure that TB goes away as a public health problem. But I think the issue is that it's not a disease for which we have a tool, like a vaccine for polio or for smallpox, a tool that, if used widely, can wipe out the disease. It's a disease for which we still need better tools, new tools. We need a point-of-care diagnostic that a health worker can take into a village, just like an RDT for malaria, and be able to test someone, their blood or their saliva or their urine, and be able to say whether that child or that woman or that man has TB, whether it's pulmonary or extrapulmonary TB. We don't have a diagnostic test that can do that. We need a treatment regimen that can cure somebody in a month or less. It's unacceptable that people still have to take treatment for 6 months. And if they, for some reason or the other, don't do that, they're at risk of recurrence, of relapse, of drug resistance, and of spreading the infection to others. So we need many more clinical trials of new drug combinations, better drug combinations. We need a lot more basic science going in so that we can feed the pipeline of molecules that are coming and that could eventually become new drugs for TB. We have the examples of HIV, where investments in R&D have really paid off with so many classes of drugs, and which have resulted in millions and millions of lives being saved, and people with HIV now being able to live almost a normal lifespan. We need drugs that can treat all types of TB, whether they are resistant to one drug or multiple drugs. We need pediatric, child-friendly preparations. We still live and we still accept a situation where we have to break adult tablets, we have to grind them, we have to powder them, we have to do all kinds of things to give the drugs to the children, and we really don't know how that happens, how a mother is able to give a toddler the right quantity of drugs, because we don't have child-friendly preparations for all the drugs. And in fact, we should really be moving away from some of the toxic drugs that we use to treat MDR-TB. So we can only do that if we have a lot more capacity around the world to do clinical trials and to do the kind of clinical research that's needed to advance the field. And finally, of course, we need a vaccine that's better than BCG, for which, again, there a lot more investment needs to be made, not just in the vaccine trials, but really in understanding the immunology of TB. It can be done. We've done it for other diseases. We now have, as I said earlier, the commitment. We need a strong civil society movement that will support the R&D agenda, because often when politicians think about TB, the first thing that they think of is how do you diagnose and treat a person that's affected with TB, and of course that's very important. But in order to achieve the elimination agenda, it's clear we cannot do it with the existing tools we have. We need the new tools, and for that we need governments to invest in R&D. It doesn't matter if you're a high-income country, middle-income country, or a lower middle-income country, or even a lower-income country. Unless there's some research that's built into the programs, we're unlikely to be able to understand the disease enough to be able to really get rid of it. And so we need all kinds of research, from basic research to downstream implementation research, just good monitoring, evaluation, data, analysis, and action on that data. And thank you for including TB research and development in that message. Thank you very much.